Then he pushed his front feet in. A lot of Ribsy was left over. The clerk was leaning over the counter, watching. "I guess I'll have to have some string and paper too," Henry said. "If I can have some free." "Well, now I've seen everything." The clerk shook his head as he handed a piece of string and a big sheet of paper across the counter. Ribsy whimpered, but he held still while Henry wrapped the paper loosely around his head and shoulders and tied it with the string. The dog made a lumpy package, but by taking one handle of the bag in each hand, Henry was able to carry it to the bus stop. He didn't think the bus driver would notice him. It was getting dark, and the crowd of people, most of them with packages, were waiting at the corner. A few spatters of rain hit the pavement. This time Henry remembered his dime. Both hands were full, so he held the dime in his teeth and stood behind the woman with a bag of apples. Ribsy wiggled and whined, even though Henry tried to pet him through the paper. When the bus stopped, he climbed on behind the lady, quickly set the bag down, dropped his dime in the slot, picked up the bag, squirmed through the crowd to the seat beside a fat man near the back of the bus. "Phew!" Henry sighed with relief. The driver was the same one he had met on the first bus, but Ribs was on the bus at last. Now, if he could only keep him quiet for 15 minutes, they would be home and Ribsy would be his for keeps. The next time the bus stopped, Henry saw Scooter McCarthy, a fifth grader at school, get on the bus on his way through the crowd to the back of the bus. "Just my luck," thought Henry. "I'll bet he wants to know what's in my bag." "Hi," said Scooter. "Hi," said Henry. "What you got in the bag?" asked Scooter. "None of your beeswax," answered Henry. Scooter looked at Henry. Henry looked at the scooter. Crackle, crackle, crackle went the bag. Henry tried to hold it more tightly between his legs. "There's something alive in that bag," Scooter said accusingly. "Shut up, Scooter, whispered Henry. "Shut up yourself," said Scooter. "You've got something alive in that bag." By this time, the passengers at the back of the bus were staring at Henry and his package. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Henry tried to pat Ribsy through the paper. The bag crackled even louder. Then it began to wiggle. "Come on, tell us what's in the bag," coaxed the fat man. Nothing, stammered Henry. "Just something I found." "Maybe it's a rabbit," suggested one passenger. "I think it's kicking." "No, it's too big for a rabbit," said another. "I'll bet it's a baby," said Scooter. "I'll bet you kidnapped a baby." "I did not." Ribs began to whimper and then to howl. Crackle, 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 thump, thump, thump. Ribs scratched his way out of the bag. "Well, I'll be doggone!" exclaimed the fat man and began to laugh. "Ha, ha, ha, ha! I'll be doggone!" "It's just a skinny old dog," said Scooter. "He is not. He's a good dog." Henry tried to keep Ribsy between his knees. The bus lurched around a corner and started to go uphill. Henry was thrown against the fat man. The frightened dog wiggled away from him, squirmed between the passengers, and started for the front of the bus. "Here, Ribsy, old boy, come back here," called Henry and started after him. "Eek, a dog," squealed the lady with the bag of apples. "Go away, doggy, go away." Ribsy was scared. He tried to run and crashed into the lady's bag of apples. The bag tipped over and the apples began to roll toward the back of the bus, which was grinding up a steep hill. The apples rolled around the feet of the people who were standing. Passengers began to slip and slide. They dropped their packages and grabbed one another. Crash! A high school girl dropped an armload of books. Rattle! Bang! Crash! A lady dropped a bag, big paper bag. The bag broke open and pots and pans rolled out. Thud! A man dropped a coil of garden hose. The hose unrolled, and passengers found it wound around their legs. People were sitting on the floor. They were sitting on books and apples. They were sitting on other people's laps. Some of them had their hats over their faces and their feet in the air. Screech! The driver threw on the brakes and turned around in his seat just as Henry made his way through the apples and books and pans and hose to catch Ribsy. The driver pushed his cap back on his head. "Okay, Sonny," he said to Henry. "Now you know why dogs aren't allowed on buses." "Yes, sir," said Henry in a small voice. "I'm sorry." "You're sorry? A lot of good that does. Look at this bus. Look at those people." "I didn't mean to make any trouble," said Henry. "My mother said I could keep the dog if I could bring him home on the bus." The fat man began to snicker. Then he chuckled, then he laughed, and then he roared, ha 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 ha! He laughed until tears streamed down his faces. All the other passengers were laughing too, even the man with the hose and the lady with the apples. The driver didn't laugh. Take that dog and get off the bus, he ordered. Ribsy whimpered and tucked his tail between his legs. The fat man stopped laughing. See here, driver, he said, you can't put that boy and his dog off in the rain. Well, he can't stay on the bus, snapped the driver. Henry didn't know what he was going to do. He guessed he'd have to walk the rest of the way home. He wasn't sure he knew the way in the dark. Just then, a siren screamed. It grew louder and louder until it stopped right alongside the bus. A policeman appeared in the entrance. Is there a boy called Henry Huggins on this bus? He asked. Oh, boy. You're going to be arrested for having a dog on the bus, gloated Scooter. I'll bet you have to go to jail. I'm him, said Henry in a very small voice. I am he, corrected the lady with the apples, who had been a school teacher and couldn't help correcting boys. You better come with us, said the policeman. Boy, you're sure going to get it, said Scooter. Surely going to get it, corrected the apple lady. Henry and Ribsy followed the policeman off the bus and into the squad car, where Henry and the dog sat in the back seat. Are you going to arrest me? Henry asked timidly. Well, I don't know. Do you think you ought to be arrested? No, sir, said Henry politely. He thought the policeman was joking, but he wasn't sure. It was hard to tell about grown-ups sometimes. I didn't mean to do anything. I just had to get Ribsy home. My mother said I could keep him if I could bring him home on the bus. What do you think? The officer asked his partner, who was driving the squad car. Well, I think we might let him off this time, answered the driver. His mother must be pretty worried about him if she called the police, and I don't think she'd want him to go to jail. Yes, he's late for dinner already. Let's see how fast we can get him home. The driver pushed a button and the siren began to shriek. Ribsy raised his head and howled. The tires sucked at the wet pavement and the windshield wipers split-flopped. Henry began to enjoy himself. Wouldn't this be something to tell the kids at school? Automobiles pulled over to the curb as the police car went faster and faster. Even the bus Henry had been on had to pull over and stop. Henry waved at the passengers. They waved back. Up the hill, the police car sped and around the corner until it came to Click-Tack Street, and then Henry's block, and then pulled up in front of his house. Henry's mother and father were standing on the porch waiting for him. The neighbors were looking out their windows. Well, said his father after the policeman had gone, it's about time you came home. So this is Ribsy. I've heard about you, fellow, and there's a big bone and a can of Feely's Flea Flakes waiting for you. Henry, what will you do next? Sighed his mother. Golly, Mom, I didn't do anything. I just brought my dog home on the bus like you said. Ribsy sat down and began to scratch.